Council, Council Chambers, and, any remarks of visitors?
No, sir.
Go to item number 3.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council. Tonight's work session, I thought I'd give a little bit of background for those that aren't aware. I think I've told a couple of the council members in one-on-one, but for members of the public and that aren't aware. So several months ago, the mayor was approached. He serves on the Small Cities Advisory Committee for TML, and he was approached by a employee at TML and asked if he would, on behalf of the Small Cities Advisory Committee, put together a presentation for this year's TML conference for having an ethics policy for a small city. And so he agreed. He reached out to myself and the city attorney and asked us if we would be interested in doing it as a committee, a board panel, I guess as you will, presentation. And so we started kind of putting together today's thoughts and best practices, particularly with today, all the social media and everything is out there. And then we came to realize that, well, it's been 22 years since Navasota's ethics policy and social and council relations policies were really dusted off and updated. So maybe this would be a good timely opportunity for us to review it, get council's concurrence and nod on, yes, we all still agree this is right, maybe do some updates along the way. And then when we speak at the TML conference, we can truly say with firsthand knowledge that, yes, we've just gone through this process with our own community and have reviewed ours and made sure that it's up to date, and incorporate that into the presentation. And so the mayor suggested that maybe we do a workshop, go through it, talk about it. Carrie and I have done put some thoughts together, which we're going to review tonight, get your feedback. We will take notes, and then we will come back at next council meeting with something for you to adopt if you so choose. So that's kind of the purpose and the reason and how this came to be tonight. And so Carrie and I will kind of tag team, and I'm sure the mayor will have some thoughts, having been looking at it as well as we get ready for this presentation that's coming up in a few weeks. But we will run through. So we'll start with the ethics policy, and you'll notice that the format is a little bit different because we did send you a draft document of the council relations policy, I believe on Thursday or Friday. The ethics policy was a little bit different, and there's some areas where we wanted to have a little bit more of a discussion. And so we'll go through those kind of section by section. And so with section 1, which is the policy statement, the current version was in your packet. The PowerPoint that I'm going to go through is there's a hard copy there, or you can see it on the screen. But really just for the policy statement, just kind of updating the verbiage to make sure that we're being inclusive and we're using current terminology and the expectations of a public official, some 22 years later after we adopted it initially. And we also want to clarify that this policy does address both the legal compliance requirements, but also it sets a higher ethical standard that we want to promote a culture of respect and accountability within our organization. And we start at the council level and filter that through the entire organization. And then also we thought about adding a definition section to get some of the key terms within this particular policy defined right inside the policy. And so we will incorporate those into the updated language. Not a lot of substantive changes there to the policy statement. As we get into the standards of conduct, there were a couple opportunities to incorporate some references to the local government code, specifically chapters 171, 553, which I believe is nepotism, and 573.
So reverse that. 553 is if a public official is going to receive funds in exchange for selling property to the city, there's a disclosure requirement. 573 is the nepotism
right.
Prohibition, where you can't appoint family members to positions with the city. So
So we just felt like, having those cross-referenced in our policy, making sure that they're consistent with the state law. And again, clarifying, just updating the use of city staff, property, funds, equipment is for official business only. Make sure that we prohibit attempts to influence staff decisions or procurement outcomes through threats, promises, or special favors. And then as we get into thinking about digital communications and social media, making sure that even with those, we still have to be cognizant of not violating the Open Meetings Act and getting a quorum involved in discussion on city business matters, even if it's a walking quorum where we end up posting on one another's posts, so to speak. So again, just incorporating those new technology items into our policy to bring it up to current. And then ex parte communications, just to clarify there and add a requirement, not only to state verbally. Currently, the policy, this section simply says that if there's ex parte communications where, a vendor that's on an agenda contacts one of you and tries to sway your vote or get influence in some way, the current policy says you're supposed to disclose that publicly at the open public meeting. The suggestion here would be not only that, but maybe do a written disclosure with the city secretary so that it's filed with the city secretary's office, disclose it at the public meeting. And then also if that disclosure doesn't resolve any potential prejudice, then to abstain from discussion and deliberation on that particular matter. And that would apply not only to council, but to boards and commissions as well that are operating in quasi judicial or, having decision-making type of things. And Carrie was even going to kind of clarify, what does that mean? What is quasi judicial? You want to add anything on that one, Carrie?
Yes, sir. An example would be, for example, tonight when the city council is going to be considering the substandard building issue. So when a body is acting in a quasi judicial manner, you're acting sort of like a court. You are applying, rules or regulations or standards to a set of facts, and then issuing an order related to the issue, that matter that comes before the body. And so that would be one example. The substandard building determinations. The Board of Adjustment is another quasi judicial board. They have a set of standards that they are required to follow. If somebody appeals the decision of the building official, or they want to get an exception to some of the zoning rules, then they can ask the Board of Adjustment to grant those sorts of exceptions, and that the Board of Adjustment can actually issue a binding order that looks at the facts, looks at the rules that are set forth in the ordinance as adopted by the council, and then, make its determination and then issue an order. So that's what a quasi-judicial matter is. And the way the policy is worded, there are a couple of things that could be a little bit confusing. For example, personnel decisions. In the list of quasi-judicial matters, a personnel decision can be quasi-judicial if, for example, the person has a contract or there's some property interest that the employee has in their position. Most employees are at-will employees, so that I would want to clarify that a little bit. So I think it's not going to require a whole lot of work to clarify what a quasi-judicial matter is, but I think it does deserve a little bit of tweaking to make sure that it's clear. It's not all personnel matters. So that's kind of the rundown on what a quasi-judicial matter is.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
Just said that if someone is expecting to get a contract from the city, I don't know them and they don't know me, and they come by to introduce themselves and say, I'm the one who's gonna file for a contract for X. What is that?
So I think, Carrie, I think the question is, would that constitute ex parte communication that would need to be disclosed, or is it specific to only communications that are trying to influence a vote, or is it any kind of communications?
It says, let's see. Make sure I get this language.
And right now you're reading from the current, not the proposed. right?
Correct, that's right. So the language, expressly says, if such communication is designed to influence the official's action on the matter.
Right.
So there does have to be that element as well. You know, that gets a little subjective if somebody just drops by that, you know, and introduces themselves. I mean, you know, we would, it's kind of one of those situations where you'd want to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. You know, what was the purpose of them dropping by? Do they drop by all the time? Is this something that is out of the norm? You know, all those sorts of things come into play. But the policy says if the intent is to influence your action on the matter, then that would be considered an ex parte communication.
Well, even their introduction could be taken that way.
It could be.
Well, if they come through and they say, I'm so-and-so and I'm a landman for XYZ Corporation, we're gonna be doing some work up in this area type thing, and we'll probably be doing some business with you. Just wanted to come in and introduce myself. That's not,
I think it would have to be a pending matter before the council.
it'd have to be.
It would, you know, maybe at some point in the future, I think that's too attenuated to say that would be an ex parte communication. You know, if they're just trying to build relationships, that's one thing.
Right.
If they're trying to say, oh, look, we've got this contract that's on, you know, tonight's agenda. I'm just
Otherwise,
stopping by
it's
to say
starting,
hi.
otherwise it's starting to tie down, just general business, general commerce.
Correct. I think it's real common for, you know, people to come by, you know better than I, to introduce, maybe they're new realtors in the community or they're, you know, new business people in the community. And so I'm sure you've had people come by and say, hey, just want to introduce myself. You know, our business is new to the community and just wanted to say, hey, and, you know, let me know if you need anything or those sorts of things. How can I help? There's a difference there. But it really relates to a matter that is pending before council, that they know is going to be soon pending before council.
They give you what you need, James?
I'll talk to Kerry afterwards.
I didn't want to move on unless you were good, Jared. All right. And then the next one is, Section 4, disclosure and recusal procedures, kind of to bring it up to date, adding a requirement that the affidavit that previously, that already exists, there is potential for public disclosure and or an affidavit, requiring those to be made before any deliberation and before the abstention to be noted in the minutes. Announcing that conflict, leaving the dais during the item and refraining from discussing the matter with staff outside of the meeting, adding an online registry, which would be common nowadays, of those that are filed, those affidavits that are filed, and again, clarifying as to the conflict of interest applicability. And Kerry, I think you had some additional notes on that conflict of interest section.
Yes, sir, I sure did. And in section 4.2 of the current policy, there's some language in there that can be misleading because it suggests that you can take your council member hat off and go as a member of the public and speak to the matter that's pending before council. That is not true. The statute, chapter 171, is very clear that a public official, when this applies, should not participate at all in the matter. That would include not only voting, but also any discussion. And I don't think you can't just take your council member hat off and go to the podium and say, well, as a citizen, I'd like to, you know, say X, Y, Z about this particular matter or contract. And so that's language that we're going to recommend, and you'll see the red line deletions coming to the council at the next meeting. But so that's something that really just needs to be deleted.
That's been allowed in the past though, hasn't it?
Not that I can recall.
It's been done in the past.
It's been done,
Is that with
In
boards and
cities.
commissions also?
we've done,
I've seen it done.
I've done.
It is, because this policy applies to a city officer, employee, or advisory board member. So that's one thing we're gonna clarify. The definition of public official in this policy does not exist, and we're gonna add that, just to clarify. Because you can read some sections as applying to public officials, and some sections list the employee, public official, or city official, or advisory board members. And so one thing we want to present to you next time is a real tight definition of what a public official is and what that includes. And we're gonna ask for some direction from you all in terms of, do you want to include employees? How broad of a scope do you want to cast? Do you want to include advisory board members in terms of having to comply with this policy? So those are some of the decision points that, or direction from you that we're going to be asking for. But the way this is worded now, council member, yes, sir, it does apply to an advisory board member.
And you said that was section what of the current?
4.2.
4.2.
So I am missing anything that's 4.
Oh.
I go from 3.8 to 5.1.
Missing a page?
Let's see, that's the current ordinance.
Yeah, me too.
There's just a section 4, but there's
But
not
the
any.
numbers are sequential.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I may have a version that is formatted differently than.
I think you do.
than you.
Section 4 at the very top.
Yeah.
and that's
Okay,
it.
To get back to
This
the,
is what they're
to
saying,
this,
Carrie.
this example that we had,
Thing right here. And what you're just talking about was right in here. It's 5.1, what's in their book. But you said 4.2.
Page 4.
And your format was the same. When you printed it.
so it would be 5.2 in your book.
Okay.
to get back to the example that we had, if a member of the council had business that came before the court and they had to recuse themselves, then they recuse themselves, they would have to get somebody to represent them to present their case. They couldn't do it themselves. They couldn't go out as a member of the public.
In municipal court?
No, in the council meetings.
That's correct. That's correct. If you have a substantial interest in the matter, and you know, that we can talk about what the definition, that's another definition we're gonna add, what a substantial interest is. And that means that you have 10% ownership up in the business, or you receive 10% or more of your income for the previous 12 months from that entity, or you own real property that is valued at $2,500 or more.
Do we have to look at the amounts on those?
Yeah, that's right. So we would look at the amounts and just evaluate whether or not you have a legal conflict of interest in that situation. Now, if you determine that, okay, maybe it's not a legal conflict of interest, but I'd prefer to abstain and just, you know, not raise the issue or not create an issue, or even though it may be illegal, and you just want to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, you could do that. Some city charters say that unless you have a legal conflict of interest, you have to vote and cannot abstain, but our charter does not say that. So you would have that discretion. But that would be the first step, council member, is to look at what interest do you have in the matter. Is it considered a substantial interest as defined in chapter 171? Again, we're gonna clean the definitions up and make sure that it's clear as to what
What is
that means.
substantial?
Yes, sir. So it'd be a really bright line test for you. So you can just say, okay, yeah, well, I own 5% of that company. It's not really a legal conflict of interest, but I'm going to abstain anyway, or, you know, then we can just, you know, do that evaluation of the conflict at that, or potential conflict at that point. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right, so next we have the reporting of ethics violations. And again, this is, they kind of got out of order, it looks like, so maybe there was a change. This says section 5 on here, it's section 7 in the current document. But the recommendation is to revise, and we're gonna talk about these next couple sections. Carrie wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about, particularly with regard to the Ethics Commission and the city attorney's involvement in this process. So the recommendation here is for the Ethics Commission to have the primary responsibility for enforcing this policy, being the gatekeeper regarding the initial evaluation of the complaints, and having an independent legal counsel as opposed to the city attorney advising the commission, just because there is a potential that the city attorney could be subject to a bias because they work directly for the council. Doesn't have to be that way legally, but that would be our recommendation. And so we wanted to talk through that tonight. And then again, kind of using this update to revise where the complaint gets filed, what the form it takes, what the ethics committee can do to refer it to a local prosecutor if necessary, and then referencing to the previous sections, to just correcting the references. But Carrie, go ahead and talk a little bit about the city attorney's role in that as we get into.
Yes, sir. Mayor, council. So as Robert said, it would be illegal for the city attorney to act as the gatekeeper to make that evaluation. But I think if we are wanting to, I guess, remove any potential for criticism where the city attorney is looking at a matter and makes a decision and issues an opinion regarding a matter, the idea is that there be a separation between the work that the city attorney does for the council and the city as a whole, just so that there's no question about the independence, about any decision or opinion that is issued by the city attorney. Again, it's legal for the city attorney to do that, but the idea is to just assure the public that there is no influence or bias or any sort of, it's kind of like, in the past, kings and emperors, they hired people to write their histories. And what kind of history do you think that person is going to write for the king or emperor that they're writing for? They're not going to, they're not going to be critical. I'm not saying that, and I'll just say me personally, I would certainly strive to be transparent, do things with integrity, but there could always be this, thing in the back of somebody's mind. Well, was he really independent? Did he really look at this in an objective manner? And so the idea behind using an independent legal counsel would be to remove that potential criticism. The downside is that would cost additional funds if you had a complaint that was filed that needed to be evaluated. That is one downside, but you're also assuring the public that there's really an independent review of the matter. So I'm comfortable either way. I think Robert's comfortable either way. It really depends on what y'all are comfortable with. But the recommendation would be to have an independent legal counsel review the matters as they come up and be retained by the city to do that. And that's the reason why. And glad to answer any questions or.
I see that perspective. That certainly makes sense.
Yep.
And that is that to hire someone who's independent would make sense.
Mhm.
If there was something truly in violation of a policy.
Sure, and that would be, something that they would, in conjunction with one of the other recommendations that we're making, would be that the Ethics Commission be the gatekeeper to take a preliminary look at any complaint that is filed, and using the advice of that independent counsel, say, yes, it meets the standards, we need to proceed to holding a hearing and providing due process and an opportunity for the involved parties to make their case. Or the Ethics Commission says, no, it's not even within the jurisdiction of the Ethics Commission. It is not a valid complaint. Make that determination and deny the complaint and, be the gatekeeper and say, we're not going to move forward. This is not a valid complaint as contemplated by the ethics policy.
To get to that point, will it be a vote of the council the majority of the council to get to that point?
To make a decision about the complaint and whether it's valid or, no, that would be what we're suggesting. It would be the Ethics Commission.
And who is the ethics?
It would be a board that's appointed by the city council.
It's actually coming up in section, I think it's section 8 in here, and maybe we're gonna reorganize it to get that coming up earlier in the policy, but that is coming up. We're gonna talk about who is on the Ethics Commission, how they, that matter.
But this is specific for council, not staff, not.
Well, that's another one of those decision points that we're going to ask for some direction on. How broad do you want this ethics policy to apply? Do you want it to apply to just the council and the city manager, the council, the city manager, department heads, all employees, advisory boards and commissions? Some of it won't apply because, certain employees are not going to have decision-making authority, but they can still have ex parte communications with vendors. They can make certain decisions that, we would want to provide some reference points for them to make ethical decisions, those sorts of things. And so that is some direction we're going to be asking for from you. How broad do you want to cast the scope of the policy?
But currently, it's just council.
Well, the conflict of interest provisions do apply to employees, advisory boards, and the council. So right now, it's pretty broad. There's some things that, as I said, wouldn't apply to employees because of some of the limited decision-making authority that certain employees have. But
What's the cutoff point? Where does it stop being an ethics violation and become a crime?
well, if you can find a provision in the penal code or another code that it violates, then it could be both. It could be both an ethical violation. It could be a criminal
Well,
violation.
by definition, if it's a crime, it's an ethical violation.
If it's within the subject matter of the ethics policy, it could be a crime that doesn't violate the ethic. Speeding, that's crime, but that's not an ethics violation. Maybe unless you're in a city vehicle, and then it's a different deal. So
So he just stepped it up. What if you went lower and said that the personnel policy? So could the person could violate personnel policy and the ethics?
that's correct. That's true. I think there would be some overlap there. Yes, sir. And we'll make sure that the ethics policy and the personnel policy are consistent with each other.
So in the reporting, someone files a complaint and they file it with the city secretary. Does the city secretary then, well, probably working with the city manager, go to the city attorney with that? And the city attorney then looks at it and says, we better hire a private attorney? Or do they go right to a private attorney?
what we're suggesting is that it would go to the Ethics Commission and independent counsel for review. So the independent counsel would advise the commission about whether or not it is within the scope of the ethics policy. And the Ethics Commission, what we're suggesting is the Ethics Commission make that decision based upon advice of counsel.
So we're making a quick jump to the ethics committee.
Yes.
We're having, the complaint is made and it goes right to the ethics committee.
But not for a preliminary review. It would not be a hearing scheduled on it. It would be a review of the complaint and the form and the contents. Does it meet the minimum requirements for documenting, or does it contain all the elements for a violation of the policy? And if not, then the Ethics Commission would say, we're kicking it out, we're not moving forward, that's the end of it, and deny the complaint. The complaint would not move forward. If it were a violation on its face, then the commission would say, okay, now we're going to schedule a hearing on the matter where both the complainant and the person against whom the complaint was made would have an opportunity to present their case, with or without legal counsel. It would be a hearing that would involve due process, where both sides got to present their facts, their reasons, their arguments as to whether or not a violation occurred. And then at that point, the Ethics Commission, once the hearing concludes, would make a decision whether or not there was a violation that occurred, a violation of the ethics policy.
Is there some stopping point in between the thing being filed and the ethics commission? In other words, you have some people that are born to complain.
Sure.
And they make a complaint. Is there some way to stop it before it goes to the ethics committee? If it's probably very questionable. In other words, are we unnecessarily convening an ethics committee to take care of every little complaint that comes in?
You could certainly establish a decision point by, legal counsel to determine whether or not that is, I think
There needs to be some kind of a gatekeeper sitting there saying, okay, this needs to go to the ethics committee.
and I guess that's what I was envisioning, or we were envisioning as a gatekeeper would be the Ethics Commission in a preliminary fashion, taking a look at it without having a hearing, that sort of thing.
Review it, say,
Review it, say
this
this is,
isn't going anywhere, or we need to pursue or investigate, or,
correct.
or hold a hearing, as you said.
Wouldn't it be better to have the city attorney acting as a gatekeeper? He's not gonna be involved in being the gatekeeper to decide whether it should go to the ethics committee or not.
That's a possibility, and I think that's the way it's structured now.
We don't have an ethics committee, so I can't see forming one just, because somebody complained.
Well, I'm sorry, this just came to me. There's a Dr. Seuss book. It's called The Bee Watcher from Hodge Hodger. And it's the one person's hired to watch this person because they need to watch that person, to watch that person, watch that person. Where does it stop? If you have to find somebody we're looking at hiring another attorney if this were to come up, and then you're gonna have to tie up 5 more citizens or whatever it is to review this.
Which may or may not be a violation.
But it all seems to be necessary, but
So
what
just the recommendation, based on best practices that we were able to discern and find in today's world, is that this isn't a just in case a complaint comes in. Our recommendation is we form this ethics committee. We make appointments just like you do on every other board. They be on a 2-year or some kind of cycle, and we would have someone on retainer as an independent outside counsel. And if an ethics complaint came in, they would be the gatekeeper and review those. Just again, it gives us complete distance and it keeps us from the appearance of sweeping things under the rug.
Totally get it.
Again, and
Totally.
if you all are comfortable and want the city attorney to serve as that initial gatekeeper, he's willing to. That's just not what we perceive as industry best practices, but it is legal.
What towns or cities did you find that you're wanting to replicate, or big cities, College Station?
I think we looked at several. Round Rock would be one, San Marcos. There were some others that Robert may have looked at. Brian looked at their approach. And, looked at other materials that were presented at conferences too.
It's a pessimistic approach.
I'm sorry?
It's a pessimistic approach that we're gonna need an ethics council. We haven't over the years.
And that's true, so I don't know if I would call it pessimistic. I think you're just being prepared for when,
CYA,
if and when one is filed. Because if one were filed now, you would need to make the appointments, you'd need to, run through the process where, if you have this in place,
We own lots of fire trucks, just in case.
Well, one could argue that life insurance is a pessimistic approach.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
That's right.
It all sounds very similar to like if something happened within the police department or the sheriff's department, it's automatic. They call in the Texas Rangers or something to investigate, it seems like. And we would be doing somewhat the same thing by turning it over, washing up. We wouldn't be deciding, yes, it is, no, it isn't. And as you use the great sweep it under the carpet, we don't want this out or something, and then be a little bit more transparent.
But we're asking for people to sign up for these volunteer organizations, boards and commissions. Get them and appoint them on there for a 2-year term and never call them.
That would be our hope.
Yeah.
That would be our hope, but it's gonna discourage those 5 people.
Hopefully
I hope they don't have to do
it.
Unless the people were selected by a position that they had that might tie into their job. So it wouldn't be out of their way to belong to the commission.
And you're gonna see that in just a minute. I guess what I was gonna suggest, Mr. Mayor, is in the interest of time, so we don't run short getting to the council meeting, I'll go through the rest, but clearly we've got some more discussion to have. So I'll run through here. We'll continue to take some notes. And so advisory opinions are, again, that's if we're not sure if something reaches that magnitude or requires a conflict of interest disclosure, we can ask for an advisory opinion. Again, the city attorney's recommendation is that we use that outside counsel and have them issue the advisory opinions. And then again, using today's technology, we on our website have those independent advisory opinions posted on the website. Thank you, Lupe. I was behind one. And then as we get into the actual ethics commission, there's 2 slides on this one, I believe. Let me make sure, yeah. So the thought would be to revise the ethics commission membership and authority, make sure that we're clear there, empower them to be the gatekeeper. That, again, we're going to have more discussion on that based on what we were just talking about, for determining validity of a complaint, establishing the hearing process and procedures, and then granting authority of that ethics commission to issue sanctions, except where it's required to come to council or through the city manager's office based on our charter. And then as we get into the more specifics on that, that section, the clarifying the composition, the recommendation would be that we try to ensure independence, expertise, and lack of conflicts by using residents who have demonstrated high ethical standards and integrity. The recommendations are that we try to find those with a background that would be consistent with these kinds of matters, such as, this is not an exhaustive list, it's just some examples that we found online. Retired judges or attorneys, those that are in the ethics or compliance professions, retired city managers or city clerks. If you happen to have one that lives in your city, not making a recommendation for an appointment. That was a joke. Brad still lives here. And then academicians, those out of academia. I think we do have quite a number of residents that come out of academia. So I think we have a variety of folks that would be certainly meet those recommendations, but that's not, again, it's not an exhaustive list. It was just a suggestion. And to disallow not only current officials from neighboring cities, but anyone that really has active matters before this board. You don't want them to end up in a conflict of interest themselves. So we try to avoid that. And then again, in this, we would define that this is updates because it's not in the current policy, defining the terms of those appointments, what a quorum is, their meeting procedures, the standards of proof. Is it going to be preponderance of the evidence, or but beyond a shadow of a doubt or beyond a reasonable doubt, like in criminal cases, due process, notices, right to counsel, opportunity to present evidence. Again, just touching on all of those things and spelling it out for the committee. And then as we get towards the end of it, penalties, exemptions, and injunctions, we want to make sure that, or the recommendation is that the Ethics Commission be the primary sanction authority, replacing the general discipline language that's in the current policy with a more tiered, stepped approach, progressive discipline, if you will, like we hear in HR nowadays. Narrowing section 8.3 is kind of broad and allows for waivers. Really, we want to just make sure that council has the authority to issue a waiver where enforcement would not serve the public interest. Again, we want to be clear on that, and Carrie had some ideas on kind of how to craft that a little better so it's a little clearer. And then requiring any sanction or waiver to be read into the record and posted online on our website. And then, I'm sorry, this was the slide I was on just now. And then annual training, incorporating this into the annual training that we do for the Open Meetings Act, Public Information Act trainings, particularly for newly appointed officials, having periodic review of the policy. You know, it's been 22 years. It probably wouldn't hurt for us to maybe look at it a little bit more frequent than once every 22 years. And then again, just making applicability. Who all does this apply to? That's again another conversation that we wanted to have this evening. And I'm going to jump forward in just a second, and then I'll come back to these things that as time allows. But applicability, you know, do you want it to be council and boards and commissions? Do you want, I mean, obviously, as we're talking about, there is potentially a cost with regard to an ethics commission. And hopefully we have a human resources department, and we've got a personnel handbook that we're following that you all have adopted, and it will incorporate these same policies. So in my mind, most of our employees are governed by the personnel handbook, and we have a process for holding them accountable and making sure that things are investigated through human resources and through the regular chain. But perhaps, as the city attorney said, the city manager, who's a contract employee under you all, maybe department heads, maybe you all want it to be at least at that level where there is much more autonomy and much more accountability. Maybe you do want the ethics commission separately from human resources to handle those kind of investigations, particularly for department head levels. Or again, so for open for you all's thoughts, and we will craft the document the way you all want it. as we get into the council relations policy, I did this one a little bit different. I did one slide that just kind of gives the section titles. I gave you the draft document I had sent to you all. Because of this one was a little bit different, it's more on the relations with one another, with other boards, with staff members. And it didn't have quite the same type of changes, and we didn't feel like the kind of discussions that we needed to have, that we needed to go one by one, but wanted to have it. And I think Lupe has that document ready if we need to put that up on the screen, if there's any areas in specific that you wanted to talk about in these sections. But I did also add slides to talk about, because the new part were the appendices. And I'll be honest, those actually came out of an AI, what other kind of updates can you do? And AI came up with, well, you might want to have these appendices that have an ethics pledge, your guidelines for your social media guidelines, your annual acknowledgement form. And so that's where the idea for those came from. And then they were incorporated in there. Again, these are recommendations at this point. They don't exist in your current policy, but they are, as we try to incorporate today's industry best practices, those appendices are there. And then I've got them listed if you wanted to go over any of those appendices. So
I would like to go over.
I think with that, what's that?
I would like to go over my, one by one.
Sure.
Which I don't think time probably would allow today, but
You
I've
got
got tons of questions
On the sections or on the appendices?
on the appendices.
Okay, I've got them. Oh, sorry.
But if you want to go ahead and go.
Well, we can run through these and we can, and we can kind of go there, or wherever you all want to go. If you want to start there because we're there.
If you're trying to show us something tonight, because I know that I'm not in a big rush to try to approve anything.
No, we're not. This isn't on tonight's
Right, I'm
agenda. You're
talking
not
even
approving
the
it tonight.
next
And,
agenda.
we don't have to have it on next time, but we can work session it again. We can have more discussion. So we've got 35 minutes now before the.
Just go on to, and then I'll come back with my question if you don't finish.
Okay. Okay, so this is, we're at, in the appendix A is the council member civility and ethics pledge. And again, this is written specific to council, but if you all wanted it to, it could be boards and commission members. We can do it. We do have, something along this. It's not quite like this. This is brand new. But we do have, employees sign the personnel handbook, and it's got, it's not called a pledge, but it is an acknowledgement that they know they are bound by all of the elements in the personnel handbook. And if there's updates to that, we document that as well. So we could certainly incorporate some of the language of this into that exact same page. So this would be a pledge that council members or potentially appointees would have, and it's just got a signature line below it. And then the second one is a social media guidelines for elected officials. And again, this just kind of covers incorporating today's social media atmosphere into these policies, making sure that we're behaving in a manner that upholds the public trust and we're being transparent. It's got some general principles there, and just spells out those expectations, the annual acknowledgement and compliance. If we incorporate annual training, it just documents that we understand the council relations policy, the ethics policy, the other appendices. And again, this one is also signed. The intent would be that it would be signed annually. And then there is a council staff communication flow chart and protocol that's very hard to read. But on here, this would be, again, just consistent with our charter. It kind of shows that council gives policy direction through the city manager, and then city manager gives administrative oversight to the department heads who have supervision and coordination responsibilities of the city staff. And then the last part of that communication protocol, again, just kind of spells out where it's derived from. I believe that's the last slide. So with that, council, I'm sorry, I went fast to get through those, but now where would you want to jump back to the independent council discussion, go all the way back to that and just kind of go through it in order, or whatever y'all's pleasure?
Well, my question would be, since you opened up, said that, the mayor, you and the attorney is gonna be presenting something. We hadn't heard from the mayor of it.
No, I mean, this is just something that was important that be updated or at least reviewed so that we all are have an understanding since it hadn't been 20 years since it had been looked at, and also just for the public to realize that we do have self-imposed policies that we put on ourselves. And I think that's important for everyone to know that. I don't have anything specific.
So just for clarification for myself, I feel like that we have been asked many questions and I don't know where to start.
Okay.
We have 20 pages of something to review, that has a lot of information. And then I think the way that you presented it here makes a lot more sense in my head as far as the sections. So I don't know where to start. I don't know what's the first thing that you're asking me.
So for me, I think the first really thing to kind of get established for myself and Carrie to know how to draft the document is, do you all want, the recommendation would be to go to a standing ethics committee with an independent counsel under a retainer, that if we get an ethics complaint, they are the initial gatekeeper. They do that initial evaluation, completely removes us from the mix. It didn't sound like there was an overwhelming comfort with that approach, at least at your first blush or first instinct. So I think talking through that will give us the guidance on how we set up the rest of the document.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just a lot of information and it wasn't clear to me what you were asking from me.
Gotcha.
And so I think it's a little more clear now, but I don't know that my mind is ready to.
Okay.
This is a lot of.
Understood.
A lot of
Yes.
stuff. So the first question, I would say, that it probably makes sense that we have an ethics commission. That probably makes sense. But I think that now, who do you appoint? I don't know. Where do you go from there? You tell me what the next thing is you want to know.
How
And-
big is the
and
commission
It could
now?
not be established on an as-needed basis instead of it being again, I hate to put people on a committee just to attract something to happen
Yeah.
that didn't happen.
My first reaction to making appointments or assigning an ethics commission only when it becomes necessary is, it's kind of like in criminal cases where they try to get an unbiased jury. And if they've already heard things about it, so if the reason we need it is something that has already come to public light, are you going to be able to get unbiased people, or are you potentially going to be appointing people who already go in with a preconceived, hell-bent on the hammer coming down, or the opposite? Yeah, and so I think doing it on a blue sky day where you make appointments and you have folks that are of clear mind, to me, is a more efficient way. But again, that's just my first thoughts on it.
I think one other point would be that if you have a standing ethics commission, then they have, they're familiar with the ordinance, they're familiar with their standard, because they would receive some training in terms of the ordinance and the standards, versus if if you appoint a commission as a complaint is filed, then they're kind of like in your position, they're having to, they're absorbing all of this information prior, they're gonna have to do all that before actually taking a substantive look at the complaint. And so that would be one other advantage of having a standing committee, because then they're trained in the ordinance and can hit the ground running, so to speak. Again, it does require work and, citizens to be available for that, but, that would be one other point I would make about having a standing committee versus an ad hoc appointment basis.
Can we compare the ethics committee to a grand jury? Is that a good comparison?
I think that, in some ways, yes, but in some ways, an ethics commission actually has the ability, the grand jury is limited to the upfront part of the case. They say, hey, yes, we're going to issue an indictment. We approve an indictment in this particular case, and then they're out of it. Then the prosecutor prosecutes. The ethics commission is there from the beginning. Again, based upon the recommendation, the ethics commission is there from the beginning and will see it all the way through, and will end up making a decision. In some cases, a recommendation to council, depending on whom the complaint is filed against. But that would be one difference. The grand jury is there for a limited portion of the case. I'll put it that way.
I'm thinking too, that if you had a commission already placed, it would also be more transparent versus a case is brought before us, we appoint people, they appointed that one because they knew that one would answer, and it causes stuff. But if the committee's already appointed before anything comes up, they can't say that we picked and choose who we thought would be in our favor.
Based on the situation.
Does that have to be the first question that we answer? I'm just asking, it seems to me like we should figure out what the policy is, and if we're going to include staff or where that goes, and then maybe work our way back up to.
Certainly can.
And then to the commission, or
Yeah,
are we putting the cart before the horse? A little bit.
just, it certainly seems like going over the meat of the policy and questions that we have regarding it might help lead us down a path of what the end result ends up being, what that looks like. Makes the end vision more clear, potentially.
My thought would be the council, city manager, and the department heads.
Is who it applies to. The applicability is where you're going? Okay.
What are the ethics violations that we're talking about? In general, what are the limitations to them? We've got nepotism, we've got bribery. Those seem to be the main ones that we'd be talking about.
But those are covered by state law, and so
Yeah.
there would be some cross-reference and with respect to those policies, but we're talking about the conflicts of interest, and all of this is set out in the standards of conduct portion of the ethics policy. So it would be things like representing a private person in front of a governing body, say a council member representing somebody in front of the Board of Adjustment. Ex parte communications is something that was covered before. Gifts, the policy would set a bright line rule in terms of the value of gifts. A meal would be okay, but tickets to the A&M Alabama game would not be something that would be acceptable. So we're suggesting a $50 limit in terms of any gifts that could be accepted. Not making personal use of city equipment or staff for your own personal interests. Things of that nature. You know, disclosing any financial interest that you may have in the sale of property to the city. Anyway, the provisions that are outlined in the standards of conduct section. So there's more than just the nepotism, more than just the conflicts of interest, more than just the other state laws that we've covered. So it's more broadly worded than state law. So it does raise the level of, you know, you've got legal compliance versus, you know, here's a standard of conduct that we as a city council have, as the mayor put it, imposed on ourselves. You know, this is the reference point that we're going to create for ourselves because we want the public to know that, you know, we're transparent, we're accountable, we operate with integrity and those sorts of things. And so I'll stop there and see if you have any more questions.
Did you have some specifics on the appendices? I think you said that.
No, I had told Robert wrong. Mine is on the council relationship policy. Do they give you something to work with, Robert, or do you need more information on it, or what we just discussed?
I think this is the time for us to have those, you know, to kind of go into those. I think you've thrown out the applicability, a thought on that. I haven't heard any contrary to that, so I made a note of it, unless there's other thoughts. But I think certainly as Councilman Fultz or Mayor Pro Tem Fultz recommended, if we want to go through the other meat and potatoes items before we decide about the independent council and the standing committee, then we can certainly do that. If you want to jump to the council relations policy, we can put that up. And if there's a specific section that you wanted to talk about, we can do that too, or whatever pleasure of the council.
Is the new policy that you have put out, are you expecting that like council relations with one another is section 4? So we have all of these pages that have a whole bunch of bullet points, but they don't align with anything that's in the past policy. So I don't know, basically you're just taking out the entire old policy.
Yeah, it's really incorporated into there. It just, we felt like, after looking at it, or I felt like, I'm the one that did the organization on that one, just felt like really to bring it up to what is consistent with most places nowadays, bringing it up to a more standalone document with those kind of sections seemed a little bit more consistent with industry. And so I just kind of rolled our old policy into that, but it was really difficult for me to do it as a red line document.
And there's no way really to compare section 10 with a potential section 10 here. It's just a whole new document.
Well, the sections are pretty consistent, I thought.
I'm sorry, they're not numbered, is the only thing. So
Correct. I just
page
numbered
9
them.
may-
I just numbered them, you know, from the main sections. I went through and put numbers to them so that, again, so when we start thinking about the future and someone looking stuff up, like chapter numbers, felt a little bit more organized.
I think that would have been helpful. My copy does not have numbers.
Correct. The current policy doesn't have them. So the current council relations.
Sorry, this is the current one, and it says section 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And then if I go to the first page of this, there is no section number or anything. So it's hard to even know what I'm comparing.
Right, because I think that what you're looking at, that current one is the ethics policy. The only thing in your book is the current ethics and then council relations.
I don't know. 1, 2, 3.
Right, Susie?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I think council relations with city staff, but it doesn't reference a number.
Correct. That's the council relations policy.
Okay, totally different than the first section.
That's the ethics policy, right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, sorry about that. It was,
That's all right.
I don't have what they're looking at, so I don't know.
On,
All I have is what's in this book.
on the council relations with city staff, limiting the directed to the city manager, city attorney, city secretary, department heads. I'm wondering about the relations with the council, with the city attorney. If there should be a gatekeeper there or something, or because there is, among other things, there's a monetary thing, since we pay the city attorney by his billable hours, that for anybody on staff, just, or on the council, just being able to willy-nilly contact the, city attorney, if that shouldn't be limited in going through the, say, the city manager.
Councilmember, we do have, in our relations with, other clients, some of them do appoint, or designate points of contact. That if a question or potential project comes through anyone other than the designated person or persons, by council, that, we would call the city manager and say, hey, is this okay to be working on, or, call the mayor, something like that. So each city does it differently. And, I think that would be up to your discretion as a council to set and say, okay, if there is here's how we want the flow to work, that's got to be approved by the city manager before we, turn on the computer and do any research on it, or anything like that. I think that would be up to the council to determine how you want your legal services to be provided and incurred by the city.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'll start with some questions. It looks like we've got 13, 14 minutes. For what you sent us in an email, policies and protocol related to conduct. Got some questions there. Reflecting council opinion. council members should remember, they speak only for themselves and not for other council members. Is that through all conversations, or is that just out in the public, or can you explain that?
Well, I think it applies, so Lupe, we're on the document, the Word document, I think we're on page 4, section 3. I think that's just a statement of fact that council members, when they are engaging in discussion, don't speak for other members of council. Each person on here gets one vote, independent of one another, and doesn't speak for each other. They speak, the council only speaks in the collective when seated at this dais.
So I guess when we're talking up here, I guess it's something similar to when we had the appointment of Grant here. When we came out of executive session, when I made the statement that, I'm speaking for James. You know, I made myself clear that I wasn't speaking for the council.
Right.
Is that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly, yeah, I don't think this is referencing anyone has done anything wrong. It's just stating exactly what you just said. Yeah, when council speaks. And sometimes, because it can get confusing in public, particularly if they know your position, sometimes it can get confusing, so you need to be clear. And, you know, that we've all done that from time to time, making sure that we say, hey, I'm speaking only on just my opinion. This isn't the opinion of the city or of the council or of, you know.
Okay, then on that same, section 3, ceremonial events. Requests for the city representation of ceremonial events will be managed by city staff. The mayor serve as the primary representative. If unable, staff will determine if the event organizer would like another council member to attend. But if you go down a little bit further, it said that somewhere in this document that you sent that if the mayor can't make it, staff will appoint someone to go. Did somebody else, you remember reading that, council members?
Well, I think that staff takes care of trying to find somebody else to substitute, but I don't think at
But
this
if the
point.
mayor can't do anything, doesn't it fall to the mayor pro tem? It should.
But I think that's just an administrative matter of the staff.
No, but it's in the policy though. We're talking about voting on this. So I'm just trying to make sure that
Yeah.
we all know what's in it.
I didn't read it that way.
What'd you say?
I said, I didn't read it that way. I was,
Well, we all have different interpretations. That's the reason I don't think that we need to rush through this, because when we rush through it, we're gonna miss something. And I think that I need to sit down with you. I've got a ton of questions, but we can be here all night. I think that you and I just need to, you explain it to me and everything, because.
Okay. Yeah. And what I was gonna suggest, since we are getting close, we can finish up with whatever questions are remaining time. But then I was just gonna suggest, I don't think we're ready to put it on the next agenda. We will, if that workshop is already full, then we'll just push it to the next one. Again, we've started the process. We're going through the process. Our intent was to go through it, make sure that we get everyone's input, that we create the document that you all want, and that we will bring that document to you all to adopt. So not suggesting that we rush it at all.
And then you can meet one-on-one.
Yeah, we can certainly meet
Specific.
one-on-one as often as we need to until we, to kind of go through them one by one and then again, have open discussion at here when we, come back with them.
I found that
We already
the,
have one in place now, and it's,
Yeah, I don't see nothing wrong with it, but, you know, I think that we just
We're
may
just-
need to add to it. or
we're
take
just
something
looking
away.
at enhancing it or updating it,
Tweaking it.
basically. Yeah. Sure don't want to make it any longer than it has to be.
I found that this council relations policy, answered most of my questions. The problem is that a lot of water's passed under the bridge since we, adopted it. A lot of, progress has been made in communications of various kinds, and I don't know, that's not in my bailiwick to decide if we're covering all of the new changes, things that are affected through the new changes. But I found that what we have here is good, but it can probably be better with that. And I'll defer to my technical friends.
One other quick question here that, on the correspondence signatures. Council members should coordinate with staff before responding to public correspondence to ensure accuracy. So if someone send me an email, I need to refer to staff before replying to that?
So I think I think the intent here is not to derail your individual communications with your constituents, but where someone is asking for progress updates or things about ongoing city matters, where it might be necessary to get a validation on timelines or work project progress that's been completed or anything. Maybe this can be worded a little better, but I think the intent here is simply to coordinate that, to make sure that we don't give false information or false hopes. Yeah, just make sure that we're giving accurate information when we are giving information out, so that we don't, again, end up with broken promises or the appearance thereof.
Just, in reading all the new stuff, I'm gonna call it, all five of us were up here. Grant was appointed, but before then, he was elected. We all are elected by the people. And from what I'm reading through some of this, is that some of the power is want to be taken away from the council and put more on towards the staff. And before I talk too much, I want to just sit down with you and just talk one-on-one with you.
Okay.
Because,
That certainly wasn't the intent. The intent was to be consistent with our charter. But I want to make sure that we have those conversations and we can get Carrie, involved at where we need to, and make sure that it's, again, consistent with what the charter is. And we were just trying to reduce to writing what the expectations are therein.
and like I said, interpretation could be wrong, but
But we'll make it clear.
okay.
We'll get there.
all right. Well, we'll adjourn.